What's up, agency owners? Jason Swenk here with another episode of the Smart Agency Masterclass, a podcast for digital agency owners who want to scale and grow faster, where we share stories and frameworks where you can use and benefit. On today's episode, we're going to talk about making good decisions. My son always tells me I make bad life decisions, so maybe this guest can help me out. So let's go ahead and jump into the show. Hey, Frederick, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, tell us who you are and what do you do?
So, my name is Frederic Bahnson, and I am a consultant and coach trying to use the best and broadest understanding I can get of how to make good decisions so that I can support people in building better lives, as you were alluding to, and really succeeding in their business through making better choices.
Very cool. Now, you started off life as a doctor and a surgeon, and you're still a surgeon. What was the decision that made you kind of rethink that?
Yeah, so I do still do medicine. I'm a surgeon part-time, and then I do this consulting with a lot more of my time now. And that choice evolved over time as I found this work rewarding on the side. It was a thing that developed kind of organically through an interest in decision science, initially fairly selfishly. I needed information on how to make career decision myself and found good stuff out there and realized that that helped me not only in my own career development, but also in my life outside of work. And so I just became more and more fascinated with psychology research, business, best advice, best practice, organizational psych, and economic research, and learned that bringing that stuff together made my life and my work better. And started, through working with initially surgical trainees and talking about career choice, that kind of expanded out into outside of medicine and working with small nonprofits and big companies, individuals and teams, and just have found that more and more rewarding the more of it I get to do. And so not too long ago, I carved out a big chunk of my time to dedicate more time specifically to these types of conversations.
So you're telling me heads or tails is not a good way to make a decision? It's not scientific. I tried it
Well,
like 10 times. I'm like, come on, like I'm just going to go
yeah,
with the
you
most.
just keep flipping that coin until it comes up the way you want, right?
That's what
Right.
I usually do.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the science of making decisions.
Well, so I would say you can approach that from many angles. One of the ways I come at it is just trying to understand that we all have a lot of biases. And, some of them we would call blind spots, some of them we would call kind of tendencies to do things that maybe feel good or help us in the short term, but aren't in our own long term best interest. And a lot of that comes from psychology research, but some of it comes from economics and business school, and all of those things together point to, okay, here are systematic ways that we do this wrong, that we make decisions in that aren't in our own best interest, or that we fail to follow through on decisions that we've made. And in any given instance, you can kind of look at that and justify it to yourself, right? You can say, like, oh, I did this because of this, but it didn't turn out the way I was going to expect. But when you look over time, if you're honest with yourself, and the way we do it better is when we look at other people, we see the patterns, right? It's hard to do that for ourselves. Um, but when we look at other people, and that's what the research does, you see these patterns of, oh, we consistently undervalue long-term returns compared to short-term gains, something we can get right away. We consistently fail to see when we're doubling down on a losing opportunity and digging ourselves into a hole through sunk cost bias, which some are familiar with, but just this idea that because I've put a bunch of resources into this thing, I don't want to give up on it, because once I give up on this project or this client or whatever, then I have to acknowledge that those resources were wasted. But I tend not to make that acknowledgement as long as I'm still working on it. But
So
what that leads to is you just keep digging in deeper and deeper on the same hole that may not be taking you where you want to go.
so does the science really tell you that bad decision making is based on your ego? Because it sounds like an ego thing, right? And
Well,
I look at all my bad decisions I've made. It's based on ego. I'm not saying I
I
have a big ego, but it's like this person did this, and I'm like, screw that person, and you make a bad decision versus like if a friend told you that guy would be like, well, just don't talk to that person anymore.
right. Right. So I think some of it's ego. I think some of it is where the ego trips you up is thinking that you're objective, thinking you understand yourself well enough to not have to worry about it in the moment. And I think that gets all of us at different times, right? We can all sit back on a calm day with our cup of coffee and say, oh, yeah, I recognize that I have these biases. But since I know about them, then I probably don't make those mistakes. And then when you're in the heat of a moment, right, all that stuff is gone and you're on some evolutionary level just making decisions based on your emotional reaction, the status quo, inertia in the direction you've already been going, and you're making those decisions without considering the fact that they certainly are being affected by your blind spots, your biases, and again, we can see them in other people a lot more easily than we can see them in ourselves. And that's where the ego trips you up.
So everybody listening and watching the show is obviously good decision making because they're listening to us right now. I'm just kidding.
Definitely.
We all make bad decisions. So what are some ways to kind of take the ego out to really, is there a particular framework that you've used in order to help people make better decisions?
Yeah. And I would say, we want to be careful about taking emotion all the way out, because I think emotion is information, right? Understanding how we feel about something. Our gut is telling us something, but we want to use our emotional reaction to something as a piece of information, not have that emotional reaction be in the driver's seat when we're making the decision. And one of the ways to do that is to just have a process to say, okay, I recognize that this is a choice. So I'm going to step through a few steps so that I don't skip any of the important, mileposts along the way to making a big decision well.
So
And for
what's,
me,
yeah,
oh,
go on. Yeah, go
so I was going to
tell
say
us about it.
that, yeah, that starts with deciding how much time and effort and resources a particular decision is worth. Right. And I think this is a lot of your listeners will be familiar with the trap, particularly when you're building a business, right? When you start small, you start solo or with a partner and you're growing, it's easy to be trapped in the small decisions. And you can get hung up spending a lot of time on trying to decide what shade of green to put in your new LinkedIn banner. And again, with the opportunity cost, forget, it's not that details don't matter. It's that detail that has like a plus or minus 0.5% on how much anybody cares about what you have to say on LinkedIn is, it's not irrelevant. It's 0.5%. But if you're doing that at the expense of time that you should be spending, retaining what few clients you've already got while you're trying to build your business, that's worth like 80% compared to, having to find new clients all the time and churn and all that. So getting yourself out of the little decisions, first you have to recognize that they're little decisions and which ones are the small ones and which ones are the big ones. And then
So
you can go through the process and say, okay, what's important to me about this decision? Because a given decision, different people approach it in different ways. It's like buying a car. Some people care about seat heaters and some people care about the stereo. And, whatever your priorities are in the decision, you need to be clear on those. And then you start considering your options after those first two steps have been completed. Is this a big decision? Does it deserve a lot of time? Yes. Okay. What are the things in this decision that really matter to me or to my business? And then you start digging into, how do I thin out my options and which top few am I going to spend a lot more energy researching?
So, a, a very common decision that agency owners need to make is when to really step out of the day to day operation of their business, when to give power or ownership to, not ownership as stocks, but ownership in decision making to their
Right.
team in order to grow. So, walk us through kind of that a little bit. I mean, like, I would think that's one of the biggest, the most important decisions an agency owner needs to make after they decide on what's the direction
Yeah.
where they want to
Well,
go.
and I think being clear on the direction is a big part of that, deciding to get out of your own way, right? Um, and first you got to be clear on where you're going, and then you have to be honest with yourself about, okay, what are my big skills here, and what could somebody else be doing that probably better than me, that allows me to focus on the things that are most important for growth or for strategy, right? And again, how to make that decision starts with recognizing all the little things that you're spending time on, updating your website, making, follow up customer service calls, whatever it is. When you list out all of those things, if those take up more of your time than building your relationships with other agencies or building your strategy, and say, okay, we're going to pivot towards, we want to add a bunch of courses and a membership for teaching companies how to do their own SEO work or whatever it is. If you're spending more time on the day-to-day operations than on those big initiatives, then you've got to really sit down and say, am I better off in the long run if I pay somebody else to do these things, who with 100% of their focus can probably do them better than me, and then I can double or triple the amount of time I'm putting into the things that are going to matter months and years down the road.
Why do so
So
many people have challenges with that, do you think?
um, it's hard, right? It requires some humility. It requires admitting that you may really like the way you do it, but somebody else might get as good or better results than you doing it yourself, right? And that can be a hard admission for somebody who's built it up from scratch on their own, to say, like, oh, and even if it's, they wouldn't do it exactly your way, they may get better results than you. And facing that possibility can be tough. I also think that we, again, with the biases, we get caught in the short term, right? And it's easy to convince yourself that you're getting stuff done. You feel productive when you're churning through the day, every week. I can check off a bunch of these boxes. And the big stuff is slow and sometimes amorphous. Like, you don't, it's hard to say, like, yeah, I did the thing when you're talking about strategy. Like, there comes a point where you can say, okay, we put together a strategic plan for the next 3 years, and you can publish that as a document. But along the way, and as circumstances change and you have to update your plans, those things are hard to point to and feel like, okay, I did a thing today, I checked it off. And so that's less satisfying in some ways. And so we get hung up trying to just churn through the to-do list.
This is not my analogy. I can't remember whose analogy, so I'm just going to borrow it. I remember someone telling me, if you have two glasses for people listening, and I'm holding up a glass. Just imagine there's two glasses here. And if you put in all the little pebbles first, or like the sand, and then the pebbles, and then you put in the big rock, it's not going to fit. But if you take the big rock, you put it in first, and then the pebbles, and then the sand, it will most likely fit perfect, meaning do the biggest things first. And I wanted to explain that because everything that you're talking about in your framework is about really kind of figuring out what's the big things in the long term. What are the things that are going to be the little, and stop doing the little ones as I hit my chair or hurt my elbow. You always love that when you bang. And why do they call it the fucking funny elbow or whatever? Funny
Yeah.
bone. It's not funny.
No idea. No idea. It's not funny at all.
I've never had a doctor on. You could answer that question.
No, I wish. Yeah. The bone there is called your humerus. It's your upper arm bone is the humerus. So maybe that's it. I don't know.
Some doctor just wanted to mess with us, make us talk about this on a podcast in May. I just know that. But I want you all to think about that scenario. Like, ask yourself, are you doing the big things? I know I fall into that trap a lot, and I know the right answers. I coach people on the right answers, and I still mess it up. Is there a way? Is there a way to get it more right?
Yeah, well, I think practice. I think it's important for people to realize that decision making, particularly with these types of things, is a skill, and you can build skills, right? You develop a framework, you see how you're doing with it, you get feedback, you observe the results, and you're honest with yourself about, well, shit, that didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. So was that because I made a bad decision, or did I make a good decision and just get unlucky? Because, something you can drive through, as if anybody's read Annie Duke's stuff, Thinking in Bets, she talks about, you drive through a green light, somebody runs their red and T-bones you. That doesn't mean driving through a green light's a bad idea. So you have to separate out the outcome from the decision, but you also have to look at your decision-making process, right? You can't just say, well, sometimes you get unlucky every time when things don't turn out. You need to sit down and think, okay, was it truly unluck? Was this bad luck, or was it a little bit of luck and a lot of, I chose the 20% option instead of the 80% likely to succeed option, and be honest with yourself about that, and then iterate on that. Like a lot of agency owners and entrepreneurs will understand the concept of you iterate on your decision-making learning. Pay attention to how you do it when you're making important decisions, and then see how that turns out. See if it's efficient, see if it's effective, and then go back and revise. But have a process.
Yeah. I always made decisions based on my gut, but I'm sure internally I was always kind of programmed to go through my internal process. Right. Not many people know. I was trying to figure out how many businesses I've had since I started businesses. I couldn't even count. But I can count the successful ones on one hand, right? I think there was four successful ones. But all the other ones I can't even count. And I feel that there's a lot of agency owners, and this was me too. I mean, not everyone's like me, but I always felt like the grass was greener on the other side. So when I sold my agency, I thought I'd be like, oh, I'm going to go develop a product. I'm going to do this iPhone app. It's going to be great. And then I started doing it. I was like, this sucks. And I was like, I need to go back into the agency world, and just made a decision rather than, like you were saying in the very beginning, well, I put a lot of time and resources into it. I got to make it work because I don't want it to fail. I'm like, I don't want it to waste my time. That's how I make priorities. And that's what we talk a lot about in the mastermind when they're making decisions. I'm like, look, well, is this going to save you time? Is this going to give you some more freedom that you want? Like, do you really want to work 90 hours a week? Like, I work 8 hours a week. That's it. I normally don't ever go over that. because I want to be able to do the things I want to do, but I still want to have the impact. But those are just, I had to create rules and make decisions based on the rules, all that. Um, what's your take on creating rules for decisions?
I think it helps a lot, right? And I think, like for any process in your business, if it's well defined, one, it's easier to follow, and two, you can evaluate it and update it. And so if you give yourself rules around decision making, or like you're talking about, you set a lifestyle goal. You're like, I only want to work this many hours, and so everything I do has to fit into that. And one of the things that forces you to do is that gives you an indirect route to forcing yourself to focus on the big stuff, right? If you're only going to work 8 hours a week, you sure as hell better use those 8 hours on the stuff that matters, right? You can't be fiddling around in your email for 50% of your work week, right?
Oh my
Because
gosh,
that only
email is
leaves
such a big
you,
distraction to people.
yeah, and it don't, right, and that only leaves you, that has an opportunity cost, that you need to be spending that time doing the stuff that makes an impact, which sometimes is an email. It's communication is important, but you have to be really clear on separating out the ones that are important from the ones that are just churning up your time.
No.
And I like, we talked about being honest about how much time and energy a decision is worth. I think a good rule of thumb is a rule of threes. Like, how much is this going to matter 3 days, 3 months, and 3 years from now? And if you're running a business, like if you founded something and you want it to grow, you need to be focused on the 3 year time frame. And if you're churning a good portion of your time on the 3 day time frame, then you can't be looking out to the 3 year horizon. You don't have the mental energy and time to be doing both well. And so that's, back to your decision about when to get out of your own way, when to allow other people to make some of those decisions. That's the time, is when you are able to recognize that you're spending more time on 3 day churn than you are on 3 year strategy and planning.
Frederick, this has all been amazing. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you think would benefit the audience? And then we'll tell people where they can get the book.
Yeah, well, I think we hit it. Be clear on those big goals and know how to execute on your day-to-day tasks, but make sure those day-to-day tasks are lined up with the big goals. That's the
Awesome.
key.
And tell us what's the book called, and obviously you probably get it on Amazon and all the different places.
Yeah, so the book is called Better Than Destiny: Practical Science for Creating the Life You Want. Yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, uh, and to get in touch with me, people should stop by the website. It's fredricbahnson.com, and there's some free resources on there from the book. There's a mindset quiz that'll give you, it's a quick, fun little way to get some insight into how you approach challenges yourself. And you can get in touch with me through the website. I love the
Awesome.
conversations.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Frederick. You did amazing. Make sure you guys go check out their book, go to their website. And if you guys want to really get out of the day-to-day operations of your agency and really catapult your growth in the next 6 months and be around amazing agency owners who can really catapult you and really help you and see the things that you're not doing right now, I'd love to invite all of you to go to digitalagencyelite.com. Go apply and check out everything that we're doing. Meet some of the members there that you'll see on that page. And until next time, have a swank day.